Hello, welcome back to the Arturia Profit video series. Doing another deep dive today. Today I've chosen a Profit 5 preset. The previous couple have been hybrids, but I really wanted to focus in on the Profit 5 alone to show that it's a monster synth all in its own right, and I wanted a preset that stretched the Polymod's legs, because I think that's really the heart of this synthesizer. It's the idiosyncratic thing that sets it apart from its peers. This is the sound. And we've got some filter stuff going on the mod wheel. Very lovely Vangelis-y 70s, 80s synth sound. Let's break it down and figure out what's going on. Now, one of the difficulties in parsing this sound is going to be the number of different effects that are modulating the cutoff frequency. We've got the wheel mod tied to the filter, as you can see, and that's what's causing that deep kind of pulsing effect. We've got polymod plugged into the filter, and then that situation is muddied further by the fact that the envelope filter is feeding into that cutoff, in addition to actually supplying its own filter modulations. So we're not going to be able to understand what the interaction between all of those components is unless we strip them all away and deal with them one by one. So the first thing they'll want to do is load this preset, which is the same sound. All of the LFO stuff's been taken away, and I've turned the chorus and delay off. So each time we go back to this temp preset, it's just that. I've just taken some stuff away so that we've got a cleaner sound to start with. So we've lost all that chorus and delay nonsense. We don't need any of that. That's just effects at the end of the chain. And we've also got rid of the wheel mod. You can see I'm moving the wheel mod and nothing's happening. So all of the colour in the sound now is primarily being driven by the polymod bank. The difficulty with the polymod is that there are two sources and two destinations, which means each time we take one of those things out, we're having two effects. When we take one of the sources away, there are two different destinations that are no longer being affected by that source, and when we take one of the destinations away, there are two sources that are no longer having an effect on that thing. So we need to be very careful about the conclusions that we draw. And the way that I thought was best to go about it from first principles is to take all the filter stuff away. So now the only filter effect that's happening is from the filter bank's own envelope. And actually what we're going to get is a really dull sound because there's very little frequency actually escaping anymore. You can see on span there's really nothing to speak of. So the way that we get around that problem is by temporarily increasing the filter cutoff manually. So we've kind of taken over the heavy lifting of any modulation source that might be letting more frequencies through via some kind of variable effect. If we've thrown all of those away and now the cutoff is just too low, just turn it up manually. And now can you hear that raspiness? Kind of a metallic thing going on. What we're doing here is we're starting to hone in on one of the modulation destinations of the polymod. We're starting to focus on this pulse width setting over here. So this is the pulse width of oscillator A that's being modulated by oscillator B, and what that's manifesting in is this kind of nasty noisy sound. If I take this away temporarily, we've lost that nastiness, and if I bring this fully in, so What is that sound? What is causing that horrible metallic nasty sound? I'm going to leave this on 100% just for now so that we really kind of hear it to its fullest extent. What's happening is that oscillator B, which is oscillating at audio frequencies, this is an audio oscillator all in its own right, is modulating the pulse width of oscillator A so quickly that that's the sound it manifests as. Let's peel one more layer of the onion away. Let's hear oscillator B all on its own. A really simple saw plus triangle wave. Really no complexity at all, and we've lost all of that raspiness because oscillator A, which is the thing that's being modulated, is no longer audible. Swap the oscillators over, so now we're only hearing oscillator A, and that's where all the nastiness is. Okay, so I'm going to leave oscillator B turned off just for now, because we're most interested at this point in time, in this point in our investigation, in oscillator B as a modulator, not as a sound source. So if we're hearing both of those things at the same time, it's difficult to separate them out. So now I've turned oscillator B off. That's oscillator A with all that horrible nastiness. But because oscillator B, the modulation source, is cycling so quickly, we can't hear what it's really doing. Well, we can change that by turning it into a low frequency oscillator. Now we're getting there. There it is. So that's oscillator B modulating oscillator A. And at the moment it's doing it with a sawtooth plus a triangle wave. If I switch to square wave, it'll make it even more obvious. There's the pulse of the square wave modulating the pulse width of oscillator A. But of course we don't have a square wave, we have this slightly more organic saw plus triangle effect. There it is, you can hear it pulsing. Now it's getting faster and faster. But all of that is in low frequency oscillator mode. So that's why we're able to hear the individual periods of the wave. As soon as we take it back out of LFO mode, we can't hear it anymore audibly in terms of each individual cycle, but we do hear the effect, which is where we get that metallicness from. Now this is a really interesting effect. As I change the frequency of oscillator B, and don't forget we're cycling at hundreds or thousands of hertz at this point. As I pull this frequency control down, we hear all of these overtones. They're not pitches in their own right. It's interesting actually that the overtone is so dominant that occasionally it does become the primary tone, but you can see as I'm shifting through these frequencies, it's still hearing the same note. But some of them, where was that B flat? There's a B flat. That's just because the overtone becomes more dominant than the primary tone. This is the problem when you're dealing with tonal shaping effects, that the modulation source can be so dominant that it actually becomes the primary source of sound. It's not changing the fact. I'm pressing an F there. F is supposed to be the real note, and yet So there's my F. But at a different point on the frequency range, the pulse width that's cycling in the background is cycling at B flat. It's cycling at a different rate. So B flat is a perfect fifth below F. So it's the most dominant harmonic. If that effect is being emphasized so intensely that it overtakes the root note, then the tuner is misinterpreting it as an actual B flat. Interesting. We've utterly broken this sound, so let's get back to our kind of bass effect. Now we want to concentrate on what the polymod's doing to the filter side of things. So there are two different means by which the filter envelope is being squeezed into the same modulation destination. The filter envelope has a 50% setting on its primary setting in the filter. So this envelope is partially applying over here, but it's also got a 50% value in the polymod. So the effect of those two things is going to be actually like 50% plus 50%, kind of does equal 100% more or less, if we take out the fact that we're dealing in logarithmic control values here. So I've taken the oscillator B away. Let's hear what it sounds like just as it is. Okay, if I turn the polymod off completely and the filter envelope on completely, same sound. Turn the filter envelope off completely and the polymod on. Same sound. So even though these two controls are split across the keyboard and they're both set to 50%, it doesn't matter for this particular stream of audio. The effect is negligible as far as this is concerned. The reason it's done this way, the reason why those two responsibilities are shared equally, is because the polymod isn't just doing this. It's not just having an effect on the filter. And similarly, the filter envelope, this 50% setting on the filter envelope is also being applied to the pulse width. And we've also got oscillator B acting as a modulation source on the filter cutoff from inside the polymod. That's also different. So all of these effects are being added together to create a sum total. But that doesn't mean that we can't break each individual component down and figure out what it's doing. Okay, hope your brain's not exploded so far. Let's throw the filter envelope effect of the polymod filter output away and bring the oscillator back in. So now we've got oscillator B acting as a modulation source on the filter bank. What does that sound like? Again, oscillator B is at audio frequencies here, so cycling really, really quickly. Let's drop it briefly into LFO mode. Now we can really hear it. So there's this ramp plus triangle acting as a modulation source on the filter cutoff. You can hear the snap of the ramp as it falls off the cliff. You can also hear the overlay of the triangle constantly going in the background. Those two effects are combined. But of course that's not what's really happening, because we're operating at audio frequency. And so you get that sharp, raspy FM effect. Take the oscillator B away as a modulation source and we lose that sound. We just focus in exclusively on oscillator A. Take B out of the mixer so it's not an audio output anymore. There's the overtone, there's the perfect fifth overtone. taking control. I'm pressing an F on the keyboard here. So we only ever hear Fs or B flats. The perfect fifth is the only harmonic strong enough to overtake the fundamental at certain points in the frequency kind of span as we go through each semitone. It really doesn't like that one. It's phasing so badly that it can't find a note there. Throw all that away, get back to our sound again. So all of that is what the polymod's doing. Metallicness, modulationness, excellent, all of that's wonderful. Let's take that away and bring the LFO back. Manually increase the filter cutoff so that we can hear what's going on. So this is pretty straightforward. Filter output on the LFO modulation in triangle mode at 5.5 Hz. Doing that. And I've had to manually increase the filter cutoff because the other half of the modulation of this cutoff is being fed from the source that I've currently disabled. Now if we go back to our full sound with all of that turned on, with the exception of the effects. So there's our 50% plus 50% on the envelope amounts, giving us the full filter effect. We no longer have to manually do anything with the filter cutoff. And now as I bring the modulation wheel up, we add additional filter modulation from the LFO here. Then finally, right at the end of the day, bring the effects back in. So chorus first, just thickens the sound up so much. It's an intense chorus. Type 3 is the strongest of the choruses. And then delay on top, and now it's bouncing. They're actually set to physical times, so it doesn't matter what your host BPM is, this is always going to have the same kind of sound. The sound that Vangelis would be proud of. And a really good example of the intricacy of the polymod module. It's the thing that separates this synth out from, like I said earlier, from others of its type. It's a really unique and interesting sound module. Hope you enjoyed that, and if you did, please consider subscribing, hit notifications, and then you'll find out when my next video comes out. Hope to see you then. Thanks a lot.